Greetings and salutations, and we're back with some more hardcore one talent challenge. Now, I was going to continue on the Necromancer, but I got to thinking something the other day. What is the most dangerous talent in Diablo 2? Well, that would be Sacrifice on a Paladin, because you're sacrificing your own life total to do increased damage. I thought to myself, how far would Sacrifice go? So I thought to make a Sacrifice Paladin that he's either going to kill things with sacrifice or he's going to end up as a sack of rice. It's a play on words. I always do that. A lot of puns, a lot of wordplay. You know, mid-level skill. Kind of my bag. People that come to the channel and watch don't generally come to the channel for extreme gameplay and professional esports maneuvers. They come for watching a somewhat middle-aged man with mid-level skills basically have fun. That's about it. That and tell really horrible jokes. So most of them are bad puns. Most of them. Some of them are actually pretty good. Now, I will say this. I did enjoy playing Call of Duty the other day with the boxing gloves. And I kind of want to do that again. Except this time I kind of just want to run around with just the boxing gloves. And do nothing but, be like, I'm George Foreman, I'm going to knock out the fat. That kind of thing. But I don't want to, I generally tend to have reverence for the dead. So I don't want to make fun of George Foreman. The man was quite the boxing icon. I mean, it was, I think he had already retired from the ring, and he said he wanted to get back in the ring. And the boxing commission said, well, you could get back in the ring if, and only if, you could pass the physical. And he passed the physical. And the boxing commission says, well, you pass the physical, you can get in the ring if you really want to. And George kind of responded with, nah, I just wanted to see if I could pass the physical. That's the only reason he did it. So I kind of have to have reverence for the man because he was kind of a heavyweight boxing icon. I mean, when everybody thinks heavyweight boxing, they think Mike Tyson or like Muhammad Ali or, I don't know what weight class they were in, but Floyd Mayweather, people like that, they think of, really prolific professional boxers. And it's like, you kind of gloss over the people like Butterbean, right? Now, Butterbean, I mean, I gotta give it to him. Butterbean, that man had some power. Like that, he had a goal in mind, and he was like, you know what, I'm doing it. And boy, did he commit to it. Of course, Butterbean is, I guess, better known for his appearances, knocking out Johnny Knoxville in a department store. But nevertheless, anybody that goes into the professional boxing thing, that's if that's your thing, that's your thing. I'm not about getting a whole bunch of like blunt force head trauma. It's not kind of my life. That's not what I want. I'm more of a philosophical mind that will sometimes say the right thing with the best intentions, but is often taken the wrong way. And people have mixed reactions to that. And it's true. I mean, it's happened more than once where I've gone and said something, and people took it completely the wrong way, and immediately got bent out of shape. And when they cooled down, after they took some time and thought about it, and they cooled down, they came back to me and they were like, well, why did you say it like that when you could have said it differently? And I said, if I had said it differently, it wouldn't have carried the same impact. And having that impact is kind of what made them realize the difference in perspective. And that's kind of why, well, here comes the philosophical jaunt. That's kind of why people never really understand the impacts we leave on other people, other persons throughout our life. And for the vast majority of us, no one ever really quantifies. They figure, oh, okay, well, hold on, I'm gonna turn up my fan over here. They figure, well, it's somebody in my life, etc. And they don't really put a whole lot of thought into it. But yet, the impact that you have on somebody lasts longer than your involvement in their life. Like if it's a passing friend or acquaintance and you really sit down and talk to them and you have this profound moment, whether it be a profound moment of clarity or whether it be a moment where you can say something to this person and it makes them really sit down and question everything, or at least question where they're headed in life, so on and so forth. That moment that you do that leaves an impact. An impact that will change the course of their life, or potentially change the course of their life. Because remember, we're all creatures of habit. We all do things habitually. But we're also all products of circumstance. Now, what's a product of circumstance? Product of circumstance is if I'm going through life and something happens in my life that changes my perspective, my worldview, my interactions with, I don't know. Let's say I go to a car dealership and a guy screws me over on a vehicle. And let's say I went to the Ford dealership, right? I go to the Ford dealership, the guy screws me over on a Ford. I never go back to buy another Ford. That's the product of circumstance. A circumstance that he was not necessarily the reason for, right? He didn't knowingly sell me a lemon, right? He sold me a car that just so happened to be a lemon. I took it the wrong way and took it as a personal affront. Therefore, this now molded my future decision making by being a product of circumstance, right? The circumstance was it was a manufacturer's defect that just so happened to affect all the vehicles, etc., so on and so forth. In this theoretical scenario, that's the product of circumstance. Product of circumstance says if it's a net negative, chances are you won't do it again. If it's a net positive, chances are you will repeat it again. With some semblance of differentiation, of course. There are exceptions to the rule. It's not an ironclad rule. But I will give you a true anecdotal story that happened. This was 11 years ago, 10 years ago. I was at a going away party. And I knew a couple people there. I had a couple of friends. The one that was going away, she moved out to California. And I was over there, for her and her couple of friends. And I knew them all. They were all local yokels. And so as I'm over there and I'm enjoying the ambiance, because I'm not much of a party goer, nor am I a social butterfly, I'm sitting there and I'm telling an anecdotal story to a friend of mine who was Marine ground infantry. As I'm telling this anecdotal story, it deals with me being stopped by the police when I was in my 20s. I was like 25, 26, something like that. Wasn't too much prior to the going away party, but I was stopped for truancy. The police officer thought I was 17 or younger, and he stopped me for truancy. And at the time I was like 27, 26, something like that. I was easily 10 years old. He stopped me for truancy, and he's like, you know why I pulled you over, right? And mind you, I'm walking. And he stopped me. And he pulled me over while I was walking. And I'm like, no, I don't. He's like, education is important, you know? And I said, yes, I understand that. And he's like, it would probably be best for you to go to school. You could probably still make it for the rest of the day if you headed out now. And I'm like, I knew education was important when I graduated. And he just kind of looked at me and he goes, no. And I was like, yeah, I graduated like 10 years ago. And he's like, no way. I was like, well, I don't have any ID on me. I said, but I know, I was like, the lady that works right over here at 7-Eleven, her son was in my graduating class. You can ask her. I was like, we shared a graduating class. If you want to go to 7-Eleven, I will ride along with you, and you can ask her how old I am. He's like, no, that won't be necessary. I said, well, there's a place right up here on the corner. I said, the proprietor of this place right up here on the corner knows how old I am. He's known me ever since I was a child. You're free to ask him too. Obviously, he let me go. And I'm like, okay, this is the strangest thing ever. To be stopped for truancy seems kind of weird, especially in this day and age. Well, I told that story to my Marine buddy, and my Marine buddy was just like, really? I said, oh yeah. And somebody who was right over my shoulder said to me, you look really good for your age. I said, well, I said, that was quite a few years ago. I said, I'm older now. And they're like, oh, well, you still look good for your age. I thought to myself, why would this person eavesdrop on my conversation? Back to the product of circumstance. I knew that she was friends with one of my friends. And I messaged her and I said, so that friend of yours, I said, she was at the going away party. And she goes, yeah. I said, well, I got curious. I said she had something happen in her early life where she was left out of the loop of information and it really hurt her emotionally or ended up hurting her physically. Something along those lines. And she goes, yeah, how'd you know that? I said, it's quite simple. Why else would she eavesdrop on a conversation she had no reason to? That one thing that happened was the X factor that made her eavesdrop. She never wanted to be left out of the loop of conversation because the one time it hurt her. So what happened is, as a response, as a subconscious response, she now eavesdrops on conversations to prevent being out of the loop, to prevent getting hurt in the future. That's the product of circumstance. And that's the way it works. If something happens and it causes a response where not necessarily hurts somebody, but causes sorrow, loss, feelings of betrayal, something along those lines, the person that felt betrayed will either double down on the way they behaved prior or will double back and will pull a 180 on the way they behaved prior. Most of the time, they'll double back and do a 180. Most of the time. There is There is an exception to that rule because there's a lot of times where they'll just double down on the behavior, and I don't recommend that. But nevertheless, people are products of circumstance. And there's a lot of people out there in society that forget this. And they think, well, it's just a person. And it's like, yeah, well, that person's lived a life. And that life is different than yours. What that person has lived is different than what you have lived. So to go in with the assumption that they have lived as you have lived is folly. But to go in with the assumption that their worldview is molded by how they lived is the smart decision. The best option there is, instead of trying to change their worldview to match yours, ask them instead why they think the way they think. Get the story from them. But don't just listen to the story with the mindset of, I'm going to change this person. Instead, listen to the story with the mindset of, this is the life they lived. Allow me to live vicariously through them at this moment. Because that's what life is truly about. You are living inside finite existence. Life is an acronym. You live within or inside the finite existence. And by living inside this finite existence, you live your own days, day in, day out, doing whatever it is you do for enjoyment or obligation. Many people have obligations, and they live. Sometimes they live for those obligations. Some people do. The goal of life is to approach it with understanding and to approach it with the mindset of comprehending where they've come from, instead of trying to change them. And that's where people tend to go astray. Because they will immediately attempt to change an individual or attempt to dissuade them from their current pathway of thought. And the problem therein is that the people that have existed and lived through this pathway of thinking, and they've lived through this way of living and this way of life, these people don't want to be changed. They are content living the way they live. That doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make them right. It makes them people. And it also doesn't justify their actions either. You can accept a person for who he is and the circumstances, or who they are, I should say, because generally it's a person-person basis on who you run into, either male or female. Who you run into will generally be like, hey, look, you've had that person-to-person basis with them, and you've come to the realization that they are the way they are for a reason. Accept them for who they are. But that doesn't mean you have to agree with the actions they make. If they're making an action that is either overtly illegal or immoral, you can admonish their action, but still accept the human being for who they are as a person. It's not mutually exclusive. You don't agree with what they do, but you also understand that they have lived a separate life. It's like, I have a personal crusade against pretty much every form of drug. Pretty much every form of illicit drug I have a crusade against. That is no secret. I have had that crusade against it for quite some time. And so I know many people that partake in the ganja, and they are perfectly happy smoking and enjoying themselves. Now, with them doing that, do I agree with that as from a personal standpoint? No, I don't. From a personal standpoint, I don't agree with it at all. And I never will. Then again, it's not my position to agree with it. I accept the person for who they are. I accept the person for the way they live, even if I don't agree with it. And that's the key. Because it's not my life. They may be doing it because they want to escape from something, and they use it as an escape. That may be why. It is not my position to judge. It just isn't. And of course, you have those people out there that say, well, what if they're doing this, 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 and this? And they give a what-if scenario. Okay, well, if they're doing something, like I said, illicit, illegal, immoral, then yes, there is an obligation to kind of distance yourself from those activities. And for obvious reason. You don't want to be party to them, so you just distance yourself from them altogether. That doesn't mean you look at the person and say, they're scum. They might be on hard times. They might be, say, buying and selling illicit substances because they need the extra cash. It's like the proposed moral dilemma. You know, guy gets caught stealing a loaf of bread, right? And he's stealing a loaf of bread so he can feed his family. So he and his family do not go hungry. Do you admonish him for stealing, or do you say, look, I understand you need to feed your family, allow me to buy the bread for you? Like, that's what I'm saying. There is always a reason why. And it is, you find out the reason why and then admonish them for the act. Now, there are some that the reason why is not good enough. And believe me, there are some really nefarious people out there that are just, no. You just, absolutely not. There is no redeeming quality there.
I'll put that to good use.
And I do not condone their actions no matter what. Even though they are a flawed individual, you can still accept them, not wholeheartedly accept them like, ah, yes, come into my house, that kind of thing. You accept them as their existence matters to those around them because they too have loved ones. That kind of acceptance. If that makes sense. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying acceptance. I'm not saying, like, you know, invite them into your household and have them, you know, rifle through all of your expensive jewelry, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you accept them as, yes, you two are a person. You two are a human being worthy of being seen as a human being. And like I said, if their actions are abhorrent, you call them out for that. Plain and simple. It's really a cut and dry issue. I think society's gotten to a point where the judgment of people is based solely on the aesthetic. And they never actually get to know people. Another anecdotal story for you. I spent a fair bit of time on a multitude, an absolute multitude of legitimate dating websites. I've tried going out and meeting people the normal way. Doesn't work. I've tried going out and meeting people through actual dating websites. I'm not talking like Plenty of Fish or anything like that. No, I'm talking like actual. You pay extra money, you get a premium subscription, etc., and it helps you match up with people that fit your profile of, what your personality is like, that kind of thing. Legitimate websites that actually try to hook people up for marriage and long-term dating and that kind of thing. I've been on a myriad of them. And in my experience, many of them, mind you, I had a profile picture of me. I was obviously had a better shave and a haircut at the time. Right now, I'm looking kind of ratty because I'm long overdue for a haircut and a shave. But I had a decent looking profile picture. Apparently, they thought I was a fake. So they wanted to see a picture of me. A newer picture of me. So I sent a newer picture of me that was just me sitting down on my couch. Just took a picture, sent it to him. I received probably a dozen or more statements that said, "Dear God, no." Followed by them just downright blocking me. Now, mind you, I wasn't the one that reached out to them first. I had people that reached out to me first. And these were people that had hit like on my profile. Okay, you saw a picture of me in my profile. Did you not really take a look at it? Where it didn't make any sense, right? Well, easily a half dozen times. Dozen times, half dozen times, tons. I got told, "Oh dear God, no." Based solely off of how I look. And then they unliked my profile and blocked me. And they were the ones that reached out first. So why, oh why did they reach out in the first place if they were so hideously driven away? Now, mind you, these people, if I had to go purely off of aesthetics, which is not a metric I usually go by, but if I had to go purely off of aesthetics, I would say that these people were about a 7 aesthetically, 6 or 7 aesthetically. They definitely had redeeming aesthetic qualities. And from their profile, their personality was rather cordial and amicable. But from their actions, they proved that they were, well, for lack of a better term, loathsome, vile individuals. And yet, they were looking at me like I was some form of hideous mongrel. Which, to be fair, to many people, I probably am. Many people, I may appear that way. But here's the fun part. I really don't care how I appear. No. If people like me, they like me. If people don't, they don't. That's just the way things are. Much like the song, that's just the way it is. I'm not, like I said, I've said it multiple times. Life is not a popularity contest. I am not out there seeking to be the most popular individual. I'm not out there seeking to be this just absolutely awe-inspiring, like, fantastic individual. If I inspire people, that's different. If they want to be inspired and they're inspired and they go and do something, by all means, do it. Anybody out there right now, if you want to try, like, for example, if you want to try your hand at doing YouTube, 100% recommend. Do it. You've got nothing to lose. If you have the equipment, you have the setup, do it. There's nothing to lose. Just do it in your spare time, and you could schedule things and have them launch. I totally recommend people join the creative space in that regard. But that's kind of what I was talking about everybody basing off of the aesthetic. I care more about how a person behaves, how a person treats other people, how a person really is, than anything else. Like if they're gonna be all about the aesthetics, pass. And anymore, it's gotten to the point where I'm not even looking anymore. I was for a long time, and I have stopped. Mostly because the entire dating world is a minefield. Truthfully. And I've been told by many people, why do you say that is? Well, let's look at it realistically. There's many things you have to overcome in order to find some semblance of happiness. And there's many things that there's many people that usually settle, thinking they're happy, when in actuality they're not. And I'd rather be by myself than to settle and not be happy. Right? Of course, people say, well, you say that now, but, what if in the future? I have been single for a very, very long time. It gets easier about after year 5. Okay? It gets easier after year 5. I mean, my high school years weren't exactly peachy keen either. And that is mostly because there were 7 girls in my entire class. 7. So, and I was not really into extracurricular activities. Um, I suffered with asthma growing up, so kind of limited my sports that I could play. And they didn't have any sports that I wanted to play either. So I ended up going for academic all stars. Not exactly sports, but so being the fat guy growing up in school and there's only 7 girls in your class, you don't exactly get invited to prom. Ended up going stag to prom though. Mostly because they didn't want me there. I could tell that they didn't want me there. Everybody was like, "Oh, they got so and so's got a date for prom, and this other person's got a date for prom," and I just showed up, and I kind of was getting side-eyed glances and shifty glances, looking at me like, "What is he doing here? Why is he all by himself? Like, I don't get it." And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, "Doesn't matter. I'm here to enjoy my prom." And I did too. Had a grand old time. But nevertheless, went to college. Till I had to come back and become another product of circumstance, which was I had to come back and take care of my then ailing mother. She's doing better now, but back then she was ailing with Wilson's syndrome, which was a thyroid disorder, and I just had to be there for her as like a, you know, almost like a glorified gopher. Go for this, go for that. There were times that we would go get groceries, and she would drive to the grocery store. We would drive to a city, 15 minutes away, and she would forget the directions home because the thyroid disorder messed with her memory. And I was like, well, it's right over here. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's right. So I had to do stuff like that. So it was kind of like, it was a live in care, pretty much. But like I said, she's doing better now. Her memory's a lot better now. She's very sharp. Sharp as tack. And she's doing well, but I'm still doing the whole, I have to do heavy lifting because she's got a fractured spine as well. So I have to do the heavy lifting around the house. It's okay. But I was doing that for 18 years of my life. 18 years. From the age of 19 to 37. And then furthermore in and out. I'm still doing it. But there's less obligations now, which has given me more freedom to do more things. And I did this all at no cost. I didn't take a penny. I didn't get paid for it. I didn't get any sort of compensation whatsoever, except for being able to live under the roof. That was it. And to me, that's just compensation enough. But I'm saying I didn't get any sort of monetary compensation, regardless of it technically being a job. And there were times I even had to help my father because he had fallen, and I had to help pick him up. So I literally was like an elderly caregiver in the house. And nobody understood it. Like, nobody, my friends and family, didn't understand the position I was in. They didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. And I looked at them and I said, it's quite simple. It is no different than a samurai being in service to a local lord. That's it. You're in service to them. And I was in service to the family. So I am. So I was, so I still am. But in doing so has given me many insights into life and many life skills. Learned to cook, learned to do a lot of things. I still suck at being a handyman. I'll say that right away. I absolutely suck at being a handyman. But in college, when I was there for a semester, I stuck to myself. I didn't talk to many people. But my psychology professor, because I was there for psychology, and my psychology professor was upset with me because I was breaking the curve, and he could not grade on the curve. I was in Psych 101, and he pulled me aside after a class one day. He's like, I want to talk to you. I said, okay. He's like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? That's what he asked me. Why are you here? I said, isn't that what we all ask as potential psychologists? Why are we here? And he goes, no. Why are you here in my class? And I said, why? What do you mean? He's like, you're pulling a 3.8 GPA. He's like, I'm grading on a curve. He's like, and you're breaking my curve because you're pulling a 3.8 GPA. You should not be in Psych 101. You should be in Psych 201 or more. And I'm like, okay. He said, I can't do anything about it. And he kind of gave me a weird look. I said, they said I have to take Psych 101, so I'm taking Psych 101. And he was upset about that. And the reason he was upset about it is because he looked at me and he's like, you have a talent for this. He's like, you really do have a talent for this. He's like, you could help a lot of people with the skill set that you have. And I thought to myself, well, that's great. The problem is, in psychology, you need what I call a permission slip, which is your degree. You could be extremely talented in it, but it means nothing, right? It's like if you're an engineer and you're extremely talented at engineering, but you don't have the degree. There are very few places that will say, ah, yes, I can see that you do well in engineering, so we want you on board. As such, your engineering doesn't really go anywhere because you don't have the degree required. There are some cases where people can overcome that degree requirement and become an engineer and really become something of high status. My brother has done this. He was self-taught on the CAD programs and the CNC programs at the furniture factory. He taught himself how to use them, and he just started just working at it. And they started seeing, hey, wait a minute. He approached me. He's like, why do you do this when you could do this? And they were like, how'd you like a promotion? And they started promoting him through the ranks. By doing so, he ended up becoming quite an interesting engineer for furniture. So he engineers furniture. No formal degree. He just He was self-taught on the program that they used to engineer furniture and found better ways to do things. And they've never really had an issue with him. So it's quite an interesting story. But not everybody has that. Not everybody can just say, yes, I fell into this job by happenstance because I just so happen to be good at it. All the results are not the same. And I wish that could be different. I honestly do. I think that there are people out there that are naturally talented at something, and that because they're naturally talented at something, they should have an opportunity to prove themselves, even against people that have a degree. Because there are, like I said, there are people out there that just have a knack for it. When you have a knack for something, and you just know you can do it, why are they not given a chance? Which is why I think the hiring process should be like this. Let's say you have a job open, right? And let's say you're looking for, I don't know, a welder. So you're looking for a welder. The welder, then you then have a guy who's gone to the trade school. He's got 2 years under his belt of welding. 2 years of the trade school under his belt. And then he went to another school. He's got another 2 years. So he's got 4 years total of welding under his belt, educated, has a degree, has like a bachelor's in actual welding and doing the trade. Then you have this guy who's fresh out of high school, but he spent his entire time growing up on a farm welding farm equipment. Welding everything you can imagine as farm equipment. I mean, we're talking legitimately everything. Trailer hitches, tractors, yeah, anything. Anything that fell apart, he's welding. He's got 8 years experience of actual welding experience on a farm under his belt. Businesses would dictate that you hire the guy with a degree because he has a degree. Proof that he knows what he's doing. Meanwhile, the other person's just a claim. Well, he claims to know what he's doing. I don't like that. I hate that. And there's a reason I hate that. I have seen people who are absolute savants at something. And I mean, when I say a savant, I don't mean that mildly. I mean, there was a kid. I say kid because he was younger than me, in my high school, before I graduated. He had no formal music training whatsoever. But if he heard a song played one time, he could sit down and play it on the piano. He didn't have to listen to it more than once. All he had to do was hear it once, and he could play it. Extremely talented at the piano. He never could read a lick of music, of sheet music. Not a one. Not until his senior year. He then learned how to read sheet music in his senior year. Now, the interesting part about this is he was a part of band. And he never made any band practice. Ever. Instead, he had an individual lesson with the teacher. And all the teacher did was pull him aside, bring up the piano, and play his whatever he had to play for the song on the piano. He played it. She played it right in front of him. And he kind of sat there, was listening to it, and would then turn around and play it at the concert. He was listening to songs on the radio, and then he'd play them at lunch. He had the piano wheeled into the lunchroom, and he'd play it. So if he knew the song name and he had heard it on the radio, you could go up and request, "Hey, play this song. It was done by so and so, and it was on the radio like whenever." And then if he goes, "Oh, well, wait, what song is that?" And then you start saying the lyrics, he goes, "Oh yeah, I know that song." And then he starts, and he's off and away. And he was playing classical music. He was like, people were savant. But they wouldn't have hired him anywhere. Like, he wouldn't have been able to he wouldn't have been able to have a job as a pianist, despite his skill. Now, I'm going to say this. I think job hiring should be done like this. And this is my honest to God opinion on the matter. You're looking for a welder, you got those two candidates I talked about earlier. You hire both on a 1 week basis. And you tell them you are here working for a week. This is the evaluation week. We are going to evaluate your productivity, your build quality. We are going to basically evaluate everything about how well you're working, about your performance. It's basically a performance evaluation. And that your job here, you will be compensated for the week, right? So, you know how they withhold your first week's pay generally, and then you get your first week's pay the second week, and then so on and so forth. So they get you, for a week for free. This time you get that pay at the end of the week, even if you're not hired. They still compensate you for that week, right? But it is the trial basis, and they will go with your productivity, how you interact with people. They'll take everything into consideration, and then they hire the best person for the job. Resume becomes a completely dead object. And that's what they need to do. Because you have people out there that claim women don't get hired because they look at the resume, they see a woman's name, and they say no. You have people out there that say certain people aren't getting hired because they're a minority. No. Take it all away. Here's how you do it. You just make it based on performance. You come in, you perform. If your performance is apropos, if your performance is spot on, you get the job. If your performance is not spot on, you don't get the job. Simple. Cut and dry. Now, this caveat. The caveat is if your performance slides the week after you're hired, you can be replaced by the other candidate. This is to keep them in line. You tell them if your performance slides after you're hired, you could be replaced with the other candidate. Let them know up front. That way you now have people competing and wanting to put up their best work so that you can have a better product. Product quality would go up, build quality would go up, everything would just escalate because you're getting people that want to work and want to put out a quality product because they're wanting to put their all into it. Everything of quality would increase. All it takes is the employer saying, it's now a complete meritocracy. I have 26 years in the business. I don't care. You could have 100 years in the business. You could have 800 years in the business. You could be Methuselah. Guess what? Don't care. You show up here and you do slipshod work. That guy over there that's been doing it for 2 months does it better than you. He gets the job, not you. I don't care what your experience is. Show me you can do it and show me you're consistent. If you can show me that you're doing this job consistently to this quality of work, there's no issues here. You get the job. That's how it should be done. It's time to rethink everything, people. It's time to think it all over. But that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoyed a little peering into my life. As it is. Or as it was, I should say. Because it was my life before now. My life now is completely different. It's wonderful. I wake up with a smile on my face every day. Truthfully. Life is what you make it. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I did. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope everybody has a fantastic evening, a wonderful tomorrow, and as always, have a good one. Remember, life is what you make it. All a product of circumstance. What you do today will impact someone somewhere tomorrow. Think about the impacts you leave. I know I do.